Okay, everyone can see that. Good. Everything's working properly. Well, thank you guys so much for having me today. And I am beyond honored. When Israel sent me the invitation, I was like, are you sure you want me to come and do this? So I am thrilled. I've participated in several of the webinars and they have been just so uplifting and I think important for things that we're going through right now. And so I'm just very honored to be a part of this. Here's my title slide. I have been putting the tiny URL in the chat and maybe you guys can help spread that along. Of course, I would first like to thank the Indiana Foreign Language Teachers Association, the Indiana Language Roadmap, and the Hamilton Lugar Center for the Study of Global Change for making this all possible. If this is the first time you've done one of these webinars with Indiana, you need to jump on it because this is an amazing series and they've put together just an amazing lineup of people who were, and we're all in this together. So I think it's so great. And again, thank you so much. One more time, here's my information if anyone would like to follow me on Twitter. You can find me easily and my email is there as well. And here's the tiny URL one more time. And as Israel said, I am a Spanish teacher for 26 years. I don't know how that is possible, but time just flies when you're having fun, I guess. I taught K-8 Spanish for 9 years. And I was at 2 schools every day. You know how that goes, right? Itinerant, you're going around, you teach every child in the school. And then about 17 years ago, I transitioned to our local high school. We only have one high school. And about 17 years ago, I joined the faculty at Appalachian State University, where I have the privilege of co-teaching the methodology class for future language teachers. So it's just a privilege that I get to do that in the afternoons because we all know we need good teachers and we certainly need good language teachers. So that's a little bit about me. Please stay in touch with me. I love hearing from people and I'm happy to answer some of your questions later on if they don't get answered here. I did build in a little bit of a couple of slides. If anyone has a question, you can ask them then. So this is just a time for us to share. Keep in mind that I am just a teacher, just like you guys. I shouldn't say just a teacher because we know what we do is amazing every day, but I am just passionate about sharing and giving back. So that's why I'm here. So thanks. All right, let's see if I can make this move forward. All right, here we go. So our goals are basically from the title, Rewind, Rethink, and Recalculate. As I began thinking about what I basically needed to talk about at this point in my career and in the school year, then I thought of the transitioning idea because that's literally what we're doing. We are transitioning. So I can rewind to better meet the needs of my students. I can rethink a lesson or tech tool, and I can recalculate to reach my destination. I think the recalculating is one of my favorites just because it's something we have to do all the time in life. I will probably spend the most time here in the rethink section, but I've also given some other R's that are going to come up. But right now, I want you to think just for a second, take a minute. You know what GIFs are? I say GIF. A lot of people say GIF, but I'm going to say GIF. So if you can envision a GIF or a song, even anything that would demonstrate how you feel right now, what would it look like? Go ahead, just think to yourself. Is this you? Yeah. You worn out? Are you tired? Or maybe it's like this. Yeah, that's insane. I've got another Zoom meeting to go to, except for this one, of course. Or you're just in total denial and let's just get some pizza. I don't know if you're like me. I've probably eaten more pizza during the quarantine than I have in all my life put together. So, or you feel like you're taking crazy pills. Every single day is the same. It's Groundhog Day. Every single day you wake up, same thing, same schedule, same whatever. First of all, I should say thank you for getting me out of my pajamas today and making me actually put on regular clothes. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that because I'm not gonna lie, that hasn't happened a lot since our last day, which was in mid-March. And then finally, maybe you feel like you're just being dragged through life right now. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, so we need to build each other up. Or perhaps, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this is kind of what I look like when I get up in the morning and I can't barely stand up. I haven't washed my hair in a couple of days. But this was actually what I was like in my own classroom. This is me in my classroom. This was my reality until March 13th, every day, same thing, total mess. And then now here we are working from home. Every available piece of technology that we have to use every day. So I just wanted to set the scene that we are talking about sort of where we've come from and where we hope to go. And again, doing all this together. And I love that the world language people in the country and in the world just sort of jumped on this thing together and said, we're going to do stuff to support one another. And you guys have been awesome about doing that. I've been to more webinars during this time than I have in my whole life. So as we go through this together, we're going to be looking at these R's, I guess you should say, rewind, rethink, and recalculate, sort of from the teacher's point of view as well as the student's point of view. So this is actually, the next slide is actually a bulletin board that I have in my classroom. I saw Nicole Naditz did this, Actful National Teacher of the Year. She did something similar for her syllabus one year, and I thought that is so cool. I'm going to do one for my students. But what I realized is that I should do one as well. Let me go back now for teachers. So this is our path to proficiency, you might say, or how we approach, or how I approach teaching every day. I identify my learning targets for my students. I try to get to know them really well and incorporate their interests. I use the 6 core practices. If you're not familiar with that term, you can just Google 6 core practices, and there's a lot of stuff on Actful about those. Then I plan what we're going to do together in the classroom, or as it turns out, online. I collaborate a lot with teachers, and again, that's why you're here. We're here to collaborate and learn from one another. One of the R's that we're going to talk about a lot is reflection. I think if anyone's ever done national board certification, that's pretty much all you have to do is reflect on how you've grown over your teaching career. I share my experiences. I present probably 10 times in a school year, nationally, locally, for my state organization. And then just have fun with it. If you don't have fun teaching, then I don't know if that's the right thing for you to do. Don't you just love being with the kids and get so much energy from them? And so that's one thing we're going to talk about, is how different it was when we weren't with them every day. But this is our path, so keep that in mind. And then we're going to move on to, here's the students' path. Their points are a little different. I ask my students to identify how they learn, or to be aware of how they learn, so that I can better assist them. We set goals together. Of course, they have to participate as much as possible. They also monitor their own progress with the language, so that they can see their own growth, or they can see their problem areas. They help each other. My level 3s actually work in teams, and that's a whole different session I give. So if anyone's interested in that, reach out to me and I'll be happy to share some resources about how that works. And I equate what I do every day to being like a coach. I don't know, some of you have probably coached different things in your career. I've never been a coach, so it's ironic that I talk about coaching, but it reminds me every day, you wouldn't just go out on the basketball court and just start playing a game without practicing. So that's basically what we're doing all the time, is practicing. We go to the videotape, we watch ourselves, we listen to ourselves speak the language, and we see what we can improve on. We reflect. Again, students have to reflect. I make them reflect as much as I reflect, and then they try to use the language outside the classroom. So as we go through this presentation, if you would just keep these 2 paths in mind, that's kind of the parallels that we're going to be trying to draw today. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. So I don't know if you've ever thought of experiences in this way, but I think that's so true. I can go to the Grand Canyon and stand there and look at it and say, wow, this is amazing. But it's not until I come back and really think about what I experienced that I'm actually growing from it. So hopefully that'll help you. All right, so let's start with the first R, rewind. Why do we sometimes have to go backwards in order to go forwards? Any thoughts on that? Just say it in your head. Okay, so notice I've added some other R's. We're going to also discuss reviewing, regrouping, and there's that R of reflection that's so important. So keep those in mind too. But what are we hoping to accomplish in the first place? Yeah, what do we want to do with our students in the classroom? Well, we've got several key points here: achievement, performance, and proficiency. We throw the term proficiency around very loosely in world languages all the time. But really what's happening in the classroom is our students are sort of living here in achievement and performance, right? What does it mean? What does achievement mean? It just means that you've given students some information that they can turn around and use in the same way that you taught it to them, right? It's nothing super stressful. It's maybe a little bit contrived, but they have mastered certain things in order to give you some results. That's achievement, and that's great. And honestly, if you think about classes and students, this is where a lot of kids just stay, right? But as language teachers, we know we need to move them farther along. So we get them to take that information that they've achieved and use it in different situations, right? That's Krashen's comprehensible input +1. We want to take what they know how to do, but twist it a little bit so that they have to really think on their feet. And that's more performance. So where does proficiency come into play when you think about the classroom? Well, guess what? It doesn't really happen in the classroom. Proficiency really happens outside the classroom when like a former student moved to Bolivia for 8 months and she worked at an orphanage. There she is building her true language proficiency. She's taking things that she achieved and had to perform for me, but now she's really building that language proficiency. So that's what we're trying to do. No matter what level and what language you teach, you're trying to get kids to move forward. And again, proficiency, we call it proficiency in the classroom, but really we're just trying to lay that foundation so that they can go out in the real world and really become proficient. So that's kind of the scenario that we're following along to as we go through this. Okay, what does this remind you of? Again, why do we plan backwards to move forwards? This is, of course, backward design or understanding by design. If you're not using backward design to plan, you might want to consider it. It's been around for a long time. I don't think I really jumped on this bandwagon until maybe 10 or 12 years ago, but it makes so much sense to think of, you know, when I get my cell phone, when I get it out and I'm trying to go somewhere, the first thing I do is open up Google Maps, or maybe you have a GPS in the car. The first thing you have to do is do what? Put in what? That's right. The address. Where are you going? And that's what backward design allows us to do. If you don't know where you're going with your students, how are you going to know how to help them get to that destination? So think of it in terms of a GPS. Think about your learning targets. What do you want students to know, be able to do, and understand? Then you plan the assessment, and then you plan the learning progression, or that chain of progression that Tony Tyson mentioned in the webinar just the other day, or your learning experiences. So think about that as you plan, because that'll help you so much and save you so much time in the end. And something that we do in our high school is that we give learning targets. You can find learning targets anywhere. Again, world language teachers are the best sharers everywhere because they just give and give and give. So these are, this is a sample of our first unit of learning targets. Notice it's divided into got it, on my way, or no idea. This is obviously someone who thinks they have it. And notice too, something you might notice that's a little different from most learning targets is I serve as our department chair, that we should color code our learning targets so that they are very visual. I'm a visual learner. When kids see these, they know if it's green, if the learning target on the board is green, then it represents some kind of piece of knowledge that they need to have. Or you can see a lot of our learning targets are orange because we do a lot of skills in a language classroom. Red is reasoning. These are novice low kids, so there's not as much reasoning that's happening then. But in my level 3s, there's more. So you might see more red I can statements. And blue is product. What can you actually do with the language? So again, this is visual. Now we give these learning targets at the beginning of each unit. Again, this is like their roadmap, right? They know where they're going, so I can help them get there. Now that doesn't mean every child is going to be going the same pace at the same time, but at least they have an idea of what they should know, be able to do, and understand by the end of each unit. And then we work forward together. Now, these are kind of silly, and I'm going to play I'll play a second of each one. So a few years ago, I did a workshop and about feedback, and we know how important feedback is. I think what happened during this quarantine is how much we began to realize that feedback is really the only way that we could feed forward, that we could move ourselves forward and our students forward. We couldn't worry about all the discrete things that we were able to do in the classroom because we just weren't there together. So the only way to help them is to offer them good feedback. So anyway, this simulates hitting learning targets and what happens if you don't hit them. Remember, we're in the rewind category. Hopefully you can hear this.
All right, so we're here at stage 2, and now maybe we're entering some information that's a little bit more challenging. As you can see, we're still all on the same ride. We're going to take the first steps together. We have to ascend a little bit more. We still need to try to hit those learning targets, so let's see if we can make that happen. We're going to crest, and then we're going to come down. We're all still together. This is a little bit more challenging, though, because sometimes we know that not everyone is going to be able to stay on the same path. But let's see if these kids can stick together.
Okay, is it gonna work? Yeah.
So far, so good. We're up the hill. Hitting the first and second and third targets. Oh, we almost fell off.
We almost fell off. That is an understatement, right? So that simulates how we go through and help our students get to the end of to their destination. But what happens if you see something kind of scary, ring of fire? And this is basically what happened. The first slide was in the classroom. Yes, we're more or less on the same page just because I can check for understanding more quickly. We're together, blah, blah, blah. Now, then March hits. What happened? Oh,
okay,
no.
so now we're here. We have
I'm going
to
fast forward
up
it.
through the ring. We're just going to
okay, now,
sort of we come off track pretty bad
oh,
and then we crash and burn.
Yeah.
Right?
That was not good. So that's what happened in March. All of a sudden, things just went crazy. We weren't able to hit learning targets. We had to rewind and go back and even reteach some things that we had done really well in the class together. So the main thing I wanted to show you this for is, since we're in the rewind phase, is I made the simulation to help students think about, instead of just going straight down one path to try to acquire what I was sharing with them, it's okay if you have to go back around sometimes and hit information that you might have gone over one time and it just wasn't enough for you. So I did some research and I found the perfect thing. John Hattie has a concept called the feedback loop. So this might be what happens when students have to go back around to hit some learning targets. I'm going to speed this up too.
And that is what John Hattie calls the feedback loop. And this is what it might look like in our little roller coaster scenario. We come through, we add our loop in, because some kids are going to need that extra push and they're going to need a little bit more time with some learning targets. And so we actually go back around and review what we have been talking about before we can move forward. And now let's see if that's going to help some of our students out, see if they make the journey. Go around, it's a little walk. And they hit all of their learning targets.
Okay. So we know that even when we're in the classroom together, that not every kid is going to go down the same path at the same time. Some of them might have pulled over on the side of the road waiting for you to bring them some gas or to change a flat tire or to offer them roadside assistance. And I have those kids that just zoom straight down and can do everything really quickly. But there are so many others where we have to rewind and go back and rethink and review and do the feedback loop. So to help you guys, help you remember this concept, I made this infographic about John Hattie's feedback loop, just to remind you that, yes, we say, here are the learning targets that we want you to know, be able to do and understand. We teach stuff, we give them something to do, and then we check for understanding. And some kids go straight down and they're ready, they got it. And then some kids are just on their way, just hanging out over here. And some kids have absolutely no idea what's going on. And you know that those kids exist. So think about, as you are processing now that school is ending and you're moving forward with next steps, how can you really assist those kids that do need to go back and rewind and rethink and recalculate, and not just you, but them as well? How often do you check for understanding? You might use some tools like these. Of course, I put all the fun things up. You know, the OG is Kahoot, of course, GimKit. This one right here is called the Answer Pad. By the way, when you have my presentation, each of these icons is clickable, so you'll have access to these things. You know about these tools though. How else do you check for understanding? Do you do a thumbs up? Do you do some kind of exit ticket? Whatever you do, just make sure that you're actually doing something with the assessments you give. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, okay? Sometimes I might have the kids do a GIM kit or something, first of all, because they love it. That's this one, in case you're not familiar. Second of all, my brain needs a break too sometimes. This is not just the kids that need a brain break. So maybe we just play for fun or practice, but each of these tools and all the other formative assessment tools actually do something for us. They give us data. If you're in a data-driven school, these are great because you can automatically see who's got it, who doesn't have it, and then you can think, so don't just play these because they're fun to play. Assessment should describe learning and then requires action, okay? So whatever you're giving them, however you're assessing them, something's got to come from it. You need to know how to move kids forward, and they need to know how to move themselves forward. So think of the action part of the aftermath of the assessment. Okay, so now we're sort of at the end of this R segment. So we're gonna think back to that teacher-student perspective. We reviewed, we've had to regroup, like as soon as we transitioned to remote learning, I had to review and some things with students that we had already done in class. We had to regroup and I had to say, how am I gonna approach things differently? And the kids had to do the same thing. And of course, everybody reflected. I make my kids reflect all the time because I know that there's value in it. And again, we don't really learn from our experiences until we reflect on them. So, okay, we're gonna pause for just a second before we move on to the other R's. Are there any questions or comments?
Teresa?
We had one teacher who was really intrigued by the roller coaster creator. So I hunted up the link for her for that. Jenny Jang shares that she likes to use color cups to help check for students' understanding, which sounds like a really interesting strategy.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out what that is. I love that. That's great. So the roller coaster thing was just something I found, and I actually share that with students too, because I think it's something they can relate to, having to go back. I try to really explain things to students. And let me tell you how hard that was to build those things and talk at the same time. I was just saying. So I had a lot of fun with that though. So that's awesome. Okay, so in that case, since it's almost 2:30, wow, we're gonna move forward. So that was rewind. Now we're on rethink, okay? And why do we sometimes need to just reevaluate where we are? But that's what we have to do every single day. As we know, teaching has got to be one of the most flexible professions. You just never know what's gonna happen. You know, all of a sudden you're teaching and then there's a giant bug in the room and you have to do something about it, or you just never know what's gonna happen because you're dealing with people, human beings, and we know that things go crazy sometimes. So sometimes we just have to pause and rethink. Don't know why that's happening. Okay, so let me recap just a second for you, okay? Here we are, fall semester. I presented 2 sessions at the Foreign Language Association North Carolina State Conference. I went to ACTFL, ran the social media lounge, got to go to Capitol Hill. It was awesome. And then it starts snowing a little bit, great. Now January and February hit and my new semester begins. We're off and rolling, everything's good. Oh, it's March. I call this love in the time of Corona. Now, if you know Gabriel Garcia Marquez, you know love in the time of cholera. This is what I'm calling the coronavirus, love in the time of Corona. It hits, then April, May, and June, we're sort of like, what is going on? So let's look at each of these now and see. Okay, so it's January. I'm greeting my students like I normally would. I'm talking about the world readiness standards, proficiency levels, how they can be successful. We do a lot of things with the 3 modes of communication. We get out of the classroom a lot. I have them do a second day selfie so that I can learn about them. I am a huge advocate for building student relationships. That's probably one of the things I do way more than teach. I just want to get to know these kids because I feel like the more you get to know them, if you build trust with them, then they will trust you when you're trying to share what you love, which is the language you teach. So we do all kinds of things. Everything's great. And then, oh no, it's March, right? March happens. And this was the last day we were in the building together. These are actual images from that last day we were together. And of course, I don't want you to think I play Gimkit all the time, because I don't, but on this day, somebody put that lovely name for their Gimkit name. And we just were together normally. It was a Friday the 13th. And I just told them goodbye like I normally would. Have a great weekend, do something fun, not knowing that I wasn't going to see them again for the school year. So that was rough for me, because I don't know if you can tell, I'm a people person, and all of a sudden, where were my people? They just weren't there anymore. April, we start remote learning in March. I'm in a 1-to-1 school district, and I'm so blessed that each of my students has a device. We started strong, everything was going well. I had my students do lots of different activities, things I would do in class, but I had to change them up, of course. This is my boy, Tyler. I'm gonna show you a little piece of his video at the end. So I had this great idea, like first week of remote learning, I was like, it's gonna be great. This is Flipgrid, of course. I know most of you are using Flipgrid, so can't say enough awesome stuff about it, but every kid did some kind of Flipgrid video responding to a prompt I had left. And then I said, that's gonna be great. I'm gonna give video feedback to all those videos. So it was like 65 videos I had to make, but there was that huge piece of me needing to see their little faces and them see me back. And I think that was huge. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I only did it that one time because that took so long, but it was some way to connect with them early on. And then other things I did, changing some of my activities. Remember, we're rethinking now. I normally do a live physical escape room with my Spanish 3 students, and we weren't together to do that. So they work in teams, as I mentioned before, so you can see their teams here. So I just made the escape room online, and I made up a funny story about me being stuck at home, and they had to solve all these clues to help me get out of my house during the quarantine. So it was pretty funny, and I tried to make it a little more timely. But that was me rethinking activities. Then May hit. Now, this is my actual grade book of how many kids were not participating anymore. Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys went through a similar kind of scenario, if your kids sort of stopped working as well. I mean, I'm not going to pretend. I got really defeated. I got frustrated, and I thought, why are we still doing this? Our state had basically said their grade was going to be based on March 13th. So a lot of kids were like, oh yeah, well, great. Speaking of going off that roller coaster. So they just kind of stopped, but I couldn't stop, because what kind of lesson would that be to teach my kids? I'm here to teach them way more than just Spanish. We teach them those other skills, collaboration, and just giving your best at all times. So even though not many of my kids held on with me through the end, I just kept moving forward. And then finally June hits, and you're like, hey, what just happened? Where have I been for the last 3 months? What exactly just transpired here? So here's where we are now. And that's one of the reasons that you're here, is because you want to get a handle on what happened and how to make it better, and what's going to happen in the fall as we go into an uncertain semester in the fall. So, okay, basically I started with a solid foundation, and things just went a little bit chaotic, but that's okay. So here, that was the scenario I showed you before. Now, thinking about as you move forward, I always do that. I do this regardless of if I'm teaching at school or now teaching at home. I do what I call a lesson plan makeover. You know how Oprah used to do on her show all these makeovers of these people, right? I love that concept. So I try to do that to my lesson plans at least each semester, because I think that's the only way I can stay fresh. So you keep what works, you drop what doesn't, you refocus. Here we are in that rethink. You rework, you reevaluate everything about your lesson plan. When I started teaching 26 years ago, this is what North Carolina gave me. It's called the 6-point lesson plan. This is how I planned: focus and review, statement of objectives, teacher input, guided practice, independent practice, closure. Yay, you're done with your lesson. Of course, now, as I mentioned, I teach using backward design. So I think about my learning targets, and I think about the assessment, and then I plan the experiences. I build in opportunities for feedback. I do all those things that this lesson plan never gave me the chance to do. I never knew what a learning target was when I started teaching, because that was a term that did not exist. So you guys that are new teachers have a great because all these awesome things exist that didn't exist when I started teaching. So take my OG lesson plan. Now this is a lesson plan that I actually designed. It's backward design. Identify desired results, determine acceptable evidence, and these are, this is backward design. And if once you have access to this presentation, if you click it, you can make a copy of it, you can change it, whatever you need to do. And if you remember the feedback loop, I've actually built in places that you can, when you teach them something, put right here, like, how are you going to check that they understand? And then if they get it, what are you going to give them to do so that they won't be sitting there bored to death? If they're on their way, what kinds of support are you going to give them? And if they have no idea at all, how can you support that group of students? So as you go, you chunk your lessons, right? You know that a student's attention span basically correlates to their age. So if you're teaching kindergartners, you're changing activities about every 5 minutes. You know, I'm going to go, the average age of my students is about 15. So I'm changing activities about every 15 minutes. That's what's so great about world language classes. They're not lecture classes because we have to keep our kids moving. We know about attention span. So chunk your lessons, teach them something, check for understanding, and then offer them some support, okay? This is not actually the lesson plan I use every single day, but I do use it some when I know I have a pretty intense lesson or unit that is going to need a little bit of extra support. So feel free to use it. Now, let's say all of a sudden March came and I started teaching from home. And remember, this is another unit of those learning targets, okay? And this is the amount of learning targets I would give for a unit. And we would probably spend anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks, well, probably closer to a month on a unit, or 3 weeks at least, depending on what our goals were. And then once remote learning hit, I was losing kids right and left for whatever reason. I was like, you know, realistically, this isn't gonna work. I am not going to be able to do what I did in the classroom, and I have to be okay with that. And I have to rethink, and I have to rework, and I have to refocus. So I say we because I collaborate a lot with my colleagues at school, yay. And so we decided these are really the most important things, and these are the goals that we hope we can get from our students over the next couple of weeks during remote learning. And I let go of all those other things that I couldn't control, and that was okay. I use as many authentic resources as possible. Of course, I know we all do, but I use this time too to explore even other things. My goal was to keep them practicing the language. This was actually an Instagram activity that I did with students. They didn't actually have to go on Instagram, but I found some actual posts, and then this document, it was clickable down here. They could just type in as if they were responding to the Instagram post. And again, if you see anything you would like for me to share with you, I'm happy to do that. So kids just stayed in touch with the language. Even my ones, I used a lot of infographics with them. When we did that food unit, there were just so many things that I felt like I couldn't do well since I wasn't with them. You might need to know that I didn't try to have any synchronous classes with students. So this was all done a little differently, and things they could handle on their own. So I would give them lots of real infographics that were designed for speakers of that language, you know what that means, and just ask them some basic questions. What do you think this infographic is about? Give me like 8 words that you recognize already, and then tell me a couple words you don't know, and look them up. And, you know, so I just kept it a little bit looser. Now, I'm not saying I didn't teach some things that I would normally teach, but I opened myself up a little bit, and I opened them up, hopefully. And a lot of my kids reflected that they really enjoyed the remote learning because I had started doing things a little bit differently. So yay for rethinking. I also gave them more scaffolding that I scaffold a lot for my students because, as I mentioned, I teach young kids. I teach level 1 typically and level 3, and they need that support. So you can see on this activity, I gave them some sentence starters, which I may or may not have done if we had been in the classroom together. But by the time they got to that 3rd activity in this unit, I could remove this scaffolding, and it was already there because they had had it before. They didn't need me to keep giving it to them. And it was wonderful to watch them grow and remember things on their own without me having to constantly hover over them all the time at school. So that was nice. Okay, quickly, and I know we don't have too much time, but also I challenge you as the summer's coming to rethink how you use tech. This is the Rethink R. And if you would just click this image, the next three are all the same site. And I'm going to lose the subtitles for just a minute, but this is a website from my actual presentation in 2018. And since I did 4 sessions, now that you have this, you have access to all 4 of my sessions if you want to check them out. And it's loading very slowly, but here it comes. So if you go here and access these, I've given you some examples. How can you rethink Kahoot? What can you do with Kahoot that's not the same old thing? Well, I have my students write descriptions of themselves in the language, and then we played it using their names to see if they knew each other, okay? Or there's some examples of Flipgrid. With Edpuzzle, everyone loves Edpuzzle for interpretive listening and viewing, but I often use it with just animated shorts with no sound, with no words, so that they can give the words to what's happening in the animated short. And that's how I use Edpuzzle. So there's just a giant list of things that might help you. So just think about checking that out if you're interested. And if you want to talk through any of it, I'm happy to share that with you. But just think about, do you want to use Kahoot the same way every single time? No, think about how you maybe can modernize something that you've been doing the same way over and over again. And all these tech tools are just so great because they offer us lots of support. Again, you've got some tech gurus in this country: Heidi True, Tony Tyson, Catherine Uslan. I'm not quite on that caliber, but I'm happy to talk out any tech ideas that you might have. For example, I take advantage of every child having an iPhone, basically, or some kind of device. We use the voice memo feature, and then they can just airdrop me what they've recorded. So it's just really fast and convenient. I don't use Snapchat with students. I know some teachers do. I use Snapchat for me because I like the filters. I think they make your skin look really good and they're just fun. It's a fun way for me to reflect at the end of the day using Snapchat. So I challenge you again to rethink tech. During all this remote learning, I'm gonna tell you what I used. I used the bottom. That was what I'm calling my foundation. Canvas is our learning management system. I use that every day. That was the platform where I put everything in announcements and they knew exactly where to go. Of course, I said Edpuzzle, Flipgrid, those were staples because those were easy to use. Kids were familiar with them.
It seems that we have a communication problem, and in this moment, let's wait for some seconds to have the communication back. So in the meantime, I would like to encourage you to follow IFLTA in Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, also WeChat. Remember that we have on Thursday at 5 p.m. we are going to have Katrina Griffin, the 2017 Apple Teacher of the Year. So we are contacting in this moment Carmen to see if there is any problem. Remember that next week we are going to have Candice Carey, and also we are going to have Linda Ecknertz, 2014 Apple Teacher of the Year. So I have tried to contact Carmen. I don't know, Teresa, Chanmei, if you have any communication in this moment?
No, I haven't gotten a text message from her at this point yet.
Yeah, I asked some friends to our global Indiana WeChat group. See, I'm very busy.
So Julia, you mean the registration for whom? For Katerina or?
Oh, for the WeChat, I think Chunmei gave some instructions earlier in the thread as the WeChat group has gotten very large. Yeah, I can copy those again for you, Amy. And thank you, Bettina. That's very sweet. We're really glad that people are enjoying this series.
You need to download the WeChat app. So a lot of Chinese teachers, they're using WeChat. So Teresa, about the certificate. So some teachers, they are wondering when they could get a certificate.
Yeah, so we are working on them. We've had such large interest in this series that I think we're going to move to a more sustainable model where we'll send them to the people who participated for more than 30 minutes and encourage you to write in your own name, since it's taking us a lot of time to double check what did you say you wanted your name to be versus what showed up on Zoom. So we're going to try to streamline that process so there's not quite as much backlog. So we are working on them, and we appreciate your patience for those who joined us in May for this series as well.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Let's see. Let me just announce this. So just let me announce, we are working with Carmen. There is a problem with the internet in her area. Just give us a second. If you have questions, please write down the questions on the chat.
So for those who are interested in earlier presentation in the series, like the presentation
No, it
Martina
happens.
did.
I have had problems with the internet.
Last week, we have been recording the presentations in the series, and so once those are lightly edited to just kind of trim them a little bit for timing, we are putting those on YouTube, and so we'll make those available. And so in terms of registering for additional webinars in the series, each link is uniquely generated, so we usually have that available a couple of days beforehand. So again, we really encourage you to register through the Google form, and we'll make sure that you have the correct link.
So for the friends who are in China, you can let me know your information, like your complete name, your email address, and your institution name, so I can help you to register, since Google Form is blocked in China.
Yes, no, that's a very good point, Chunmei. Thank you for helping facilitate that.
Okay. My pleasure.
So also while we're kind of here in this community space, so Inga had a question that I imagine that some of you might be able to also chip in on. For some of these different tech platforms, has anybody have any issues if their school uses Google Classroom accounts with their issues of being unable or having difficulty accessing some of those different tech tools? If anybody would like to kind of group share on how to make Google Classroom accounts for your school work well with some of these different tech avenues.
If everyone can download the app, that's YAPP.
Just 1 second. We are working with Carmen, so please, don't go. So Carmen is here. So thank you for your patience. I see you.
She's coming.
Yeah. Okay.
We need
All
a
right,
second.
so
So Carmen
Carmen
is
should
here.
be co-host again. Great, yes.
Thank you
Can
for
you,
your patience. This happens.
can
Thank
you
you.
hear me now? Literally,
Yes.
can you hear me now? Holy cow. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I'm 48 years old. That's never happened to me in my life. So as
Carmen, the
I
sound.
mentioned, is it good?
We don't have an audio in this moment.
You don't have audio?
I can hear Carmen Israel.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Carmen. Israel, are you still having
We have
issues?
your
I'm
Yeah,
gonna, yeah, is that good?
Catherine, Sophia, Eric, they say that they can hear you, Carmen. So
Okay. I'm gonna keep rolling. I'm gonna turn my video off. You don't need to
also.
see it. Yeah.
I was in the one hearing. Okay, Carmen. So people can hear you. So that was my.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
You're fine. Did we mention flexibility?
Yeah, Carmen. All right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to be done soon anyway. You guys, thanks for your patience. This is, wow. I don't know what happened, but I will be calling my internet provider pretty soon. Okay, so we're back. Yay. And we were finishing up on rethink. Okay, so we did rewind, rethink, and again, notice I have every time reflect because I think that's really important. So during learning from home, I gave my students multiple opportunities to be successful. So they were able to rework things that they were having trouble with. I had to rework things. They reworked things. I had to refocus my learning targets. They had to learn how to focus differently since I wasn't there every single day to help them. So I just think that's really important. Moving on, would say, are there any questions? But now we'll just hold those till the very end, if you don't mind. Sorry about losing the time. Here we are, recalculate. Again, I mentioned at the beginning that this is probably my favorite thing to talk about because in life, as you could see what just happened to me, that we have to recalculate and we have to regroup and we have to say, okay, no big deal that the internet just went out. All is good. So here we are now with reassuring, rebooting, literally, which is what I just had to do, and reflecting. I think that, again, I wasn't prepared to leave my kids March 13th. And so I had to reassure. All of a sudden, we found ourselves having to work from home. And this was how I felt pretty much every day. We were expected to be online with our students for, at least available to our students for about 4 hours a day. This is what I did. One of the things, if you know who Meredith White is, one of the things she does with her students is to teach them how to write a proper email. And I'm going to do that with my students in the fall because some of the messages I got from kids were very interesting. So, but just all of a sudden, here we are at home. Sometimes I got really stressed out as I'm probably going to need some wine after this webinar, after what just happened to me, but it's okay. We had to rethink and reassure each other. In order to help reassure my students, I would send them, again, using Snapchat, these little videos, and I won't take the time to play them now, but I just give you an example. This was at the very beginning.
Hi guys, I don't know if you've missed me like I've missed you, but I really, really have missed you.
So I just told them over and over again that I'm here, I miss you, I love you. I'm sad that I can't be with you. I never ever thought that I would miss kids as much as I did. I know that sounds terrible, but so I would just send them these little reassuring messages, not in the target language, but just as a person. I think we do have to literally remember that there is a human being on the other side of that screen and they need to see you and you need to see them. So I was just trying to reassure them. And I will tell you, honestly, some of my kids sent me some of the kindest messages back, either via video or email, and they reassured me. I needed it just as much as they did. Now, looking forward to the fall or August, my school is awesome, and I'm part of a professional learning team leadership team, and we decided that it's important for teachers to go ahead and try to troubleshoot what's going to happen this fall. We all know there are going to be some learning gaps from this semester to the next semester. So we were asked to create pre-assessments. So for each level that we teach, each level of language that we teach that will be affected by this particular semester, we have now created pre-assessments so that we can jump on this right from the start. And again, our pre-assessments aren't, we've outlined them. I haven't put them in the platform that we're going to use, but if anyone needs any ideas, I'm happy to share those with you too. And we just are using the 3 modes of communication, so we can see where our students are and what they're going to need us to support them on. We're also looking ahead to differentiation. How do we differentiate those kids, again, that continued with us through remote learning? They're going to be better off than those kids that weren't able to keep up with what was going on. So how do I support the kids that already know what's going on, and how do I support the kids that really have no clue? Again, something I didn't mention and on the text slide, since that's when the internet went crazy, I started using Slides Mania. If you aren't using Slides Mania, this is where I got this fun template I'm using. Such great templates. They have all these different choice board templates that you just put in the information, and then if the kid clicks number 1, it'll take them to a certain slide. If they click number 4, it'll take them to a certain slide. So they're beautifully done. There's even one that's like, looks like a mystery Google slide template. So you just put in the fun stuff, and then the slides do the rest of the work, and they're free. It's so great. So we're already looking at building even some choice boards. This is the physical choice board I have in my room. You often hear people mention giving students voice and choice. And this is really big. But when we're back in the classroom together, my kids can work off this physical board. Otherwise, they can work off a virtual choice board. Again, if a kid knows that they're having trouble with interpretive listening skills, then I will make them, and they will select the listening folder, because that's what they need to practice, and they know that that's where they are deficient, and that's where they will go. Inside each of these folders is the learning target that they're expected to get to by doing the activity that's in the folder, whether it's online or in the physical folder. So using these kinds of things is how we're going to move forward in our school in the future with helping bridge these gaps that we know are going to be occurring. Again, if anyone wants me to share any of these ideas with you, I'm happy to do that. I also gave this at the very end. I call it a loto. It's basically just a big overview of some really important I can statements that my students should have been able to do by the end of the semester, had it been a normal scenario. But I asked them to color code this for me. Can they do it with confidence? Could they do it with some prompting, or if they couldn't do it yet? And I love the responses I got. I think it really was validating to them to see what they were able to do. And I had very few kids that highlighted red, which is good. Of course, a lot of kids didn't do it because it was at the very end of the semester, but that's okay. It was to inform me on how I can support them in the fall. So again, I'm happy to share that with you. Now, thinking about moving forward, and again, we don't really learn from an experience unless we reflect on it. So my thoughts are things I learned during this time as I think about rewinding, rethinking, and recalculating, is that human connections are super important. And I think that it's, I mean, I know we teach kids and we teach people every single day, but I didn't realize how much I was going to be impacted by not being able to see them. So that was important for me to learn. I had to reprioritize my learning targets and really think about what was critical for them to know, be able to do and understand. Giving them accurate and good and quick feedback was going to help my students more than anything else I could do. And here I say, watch your bandwidth. And now, as my whole house is without electricity, I don't mean just technological bandwidth. I mean emotional bandwidth. You have to check your gut. And what is your emotional bandwidth? We cannot keep giving and giving and giving as much as we've given and not take a break and close our computers. And apparently I'm going to have to this afternoon because I'm not going to have any internet. Dang. So just watch yourself. Students' comments that I got were very positive. A lot of them would preface this by saying, I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but I really miss school. They missed the fun environment. They were proud of how much they were able to learn, and that they said I actually helped keep them motivated, which again, in turn, motivated me. Again, I make them reflect all the time. So I reassured them, they reassured me. We all had to reboot. We all had to kind of start over. And again, we all reflected so that we could grow together and we could move forward together. Because again, I said this at the beginning, we are all in this together. And I don't just mean teachers, I mean students, and whatever little environment you have in your classroom, everybody's trying to do, just go forward, right? So what is next? We're right here at the end. So hopefully this summer, you get to relax a little bit. I love this chill frog. Or maybe you'll watch the next thing on Netflix. I'm sure you've probably exhausted all your paid television channels with all this stuff. Or maybe you'll read casually, and that's going to be nice. You'll get outside. This is what I look like outside. Bugs don't like me very much. Or you go to the beach. That's also what I sort of look like when I go to the beach. I'm not really a beach person, but so maybe you'll do something fun for yourself. But above all, I would suggest that thinking about the R's, rewind, rethink, recalculate, that you simply reset, recharge, you energize, you sustain what's good, you evolve, and we do this all together. So thank you for your patience, and thank you so much. I would take a few questions. I know it's already past 3, and again, I apologize for the snafu with the internet, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, I'd like to thank the Indiana Foreign Language Teachers Association, the Indiana Language Roadmap, and the Center for Global Understanding. Teresa, everyone, all the moderators, I appreciate you, and thank you for this awesome invitation. Any questions or comments?
So we had a couple questions. Teachers were really interested in what is kind of the process or the strategies you use for reflections. Do students base this based on their can-do checklist? Do they do this in forums? Kind of how do you encourage students to reflect?
Yeah, great question. So if you want me to share like just one example of my I can statements, at the end of that, there are lists of things that they can reflect on. What are they most proud of? What do they still need help with? They write, and then I write my comments from what I've observed in class. So I do things like that where they actually write online. Google Forms I use a lot. At the end of each semester, they do a final course reflection. We're not required to do that at my school, but it's just something that I want to do for my own growth. So I use Google Forms, and then I can easily see how kids feel. So mostly those kinds of things. Also, I usually have them do a Flipgrid reflection so that they have to verbalize what they've learned and are able to do. I find the more that if you can get a 15-year-old to talk about what they're learning and how they're learning, then it's going to mean a lot more to them. So those are just a few things I do.
Great, fantastic. So we had a question from Olga, who really loved the example of kind of leaving the comment on the Instagram account and also practicing describing the house. What were any particular apps that you used for students to do those activities?
Okay, great question too. So obviously I went to Instagram and I looked for hashtags related, that those were all related to the virus, unfortunately, but I was just trying to be a little bit more timely. And, you know, we've got some other world language educators. Leslie Grahn, for example, curated all these things in all these languages. If you want to, if someone knows her, you can type her name in the chat. She has this amazing resource on Pinterest that has tons of authentic resources. Leslie Grahn is how I say her name, Gran. Grahn, and she's already done all the work for you. So, but I actually went to Instagram, found some things. I just took screenshots of them, and then I put them in a chart, just in a Google Doc, and that left the box underneath so that kids were able to type into that. And then I would just share that with them through our learning management system. The house thing that I did is on the site. I'm actually going to go. Speaking of rewinding, and again, I know some of you probably got to go, so you do what you got to do. But since I lost you guys about right here, I was about to talk to you about Wiser. They call themselves online worksheets, which I don't like the name worksheet because it sounds a little old school to me. But when you go to this site, there's a lot. It's awesome. So I was able to give kids directions, and kids can easily record their voices in this. It's another super awesome tool that I discovered during remote learning that I will continue to use in the fall. Free. I actually pay for it because I wanted a little bit more, but you can do anything you need to with the free version. So really awesome.
Let's see, we had a couple people that really loved the folders. And so Julia asked if you could just talk a little bit more about how those function.
Yeah, I'm gonna just go to that. I'm gonna go back to that wine slide in a minute. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I actually got this idea from a colleague in Charlotte, North Carolina, Rosalind Rhodes, who I saw her do something on like a choice board. And I was like, this is like what we used to do in elementary school. And, and I've heard about choice boards forever, but it wasn't until I actually did it that I realized the power. So if you don't speak Spanish, I have several categories: speaking, reading, writing, creating, obviously the culture, watching, listening, and drawing. Okay. And so during particular units, like usually my second unit and my fourth unit out of 5, I build these choice boards for kids and put different types of activities in them so that I can conference one-on-one with kids. We know it's so hard to build in time to actually meet with kids. So while they're working from a choice board, I can say, hey, come over here, bring your I can statements, and let's talk about what you need to work on. Now, doing this remotely, you can easily do the same thing while they're working on whatever you're having them do. Then you can set up Zoom calls with them or Google Meets or whatever and have those same conversations. If we are in the same situation in the fall, which I'm afraid we might be, I'm going to do more of those kinds of things than I was able to do this spring. So, but basically inside is just an activity. And again, I have the learning target, so they know, hey, I'm supposed to be focusing on this while I do this activity. And then they do it based on whatever the skill is, if it's reading or watching a video and answering some questions, things like that. But if you want to email me too, I can give you more information. Yeah.
Do we have any additional questions that I haven't highlighted? For those who are also intrigued by the color cups, Jenny went ahead and shared kind of what she does for that activity. So you put 3 different colors of cups on the table. If the student understands, they put their green cup on the top. If they don't understand, they put a red. If they think they got about half of it, they put a yellow on it. And so you can really quickly see visually how students are feeling about the content and their mastery of it.
Well, isn't that lovely? Such a good idea. Here's my information one more time in case you want to say, hey, again, I mean, a lot of this stuff I created, so I'm happy to share it with you. No problem. And yeah, just.
We have 2 more questions about the folders.
Okay.
So one person asked, do students do it at the end of a unit?
Okay.
Or is there a particular point?
Good question. So I'm going to say closer to the end, because that way we've done some things together so that everything in those folders have to do with the same theme, but they're just targeting different skills, right? So that way, if it's at the beginning, then they don't know too much about that particular theme. So I do it probably from the middle to the end so that they can see what they still need to work on before we get to the summative assessment.
Okay, great, thank you. And the second question, so for the virtual version of the folders, so when a student sees this, is it a clickable folder so they choose one of them and the folder content just pops up?
Yep, same thing. So I typically present using Wix, W-I-X is my favorite thing to use. You'll notice that all those tech tools that was a Wix site. It's just pretty, they're pretty. And so everything is just, it's interactive like any other website. It's just clickable. So, or you could make like, you could just give a set of Google, like one Google folder with all the separate folders and share that one main folder with your students. And then they could just go in and click what folder they wanted to access. You don't have to make a website to do it.
Okay, those both sound like excellent strategies. Yeah, I think we've answered so far the question. Oh, so for digital folders, what websites? So you were suggesting Wix. I assume that's .com.
Yeah.
We had a few teachers, I mean, lots of thank yous have been coming in. So one person, Ruth, shared that she really loves all of these great ideas, you know, because this is our time to process, reflect, and prepare to implement. Ran Jiao shared that reflection is so important. You know, even their college kids really love and appreciate the opportunities.
Yes.
They think that it's great that you emphasize that in your presentation.
Thank you. Good. Well, if you're ready to do national boards, get ready, because that's all you do is reflect. But it's valuable because here's where we are right now. It's June. It's time to reflect.
So thank you, Carmen. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful, Carmen, for this wonderful presentation.